Hi everyone, welcome back to my channel. My name is Brittany and today I'm going to be reviewing 2020, my year in reading. If I keep looking down, it's because I am scrolling through on my tablet my GoodReads page just to make sure I cover everything. On this side of the screen, I will be putting a screenshot image of my GoodReads year in books page, and that's what I will be using to gauge everything and share my thoughts about the books that I've read. First thing I want to share is this year I read over 17,000 pages. Now, it is 2 weeks until the end of the year, so there is still time for me to increase the number of pages that I've read. So if that changes, I will come back and make a notation right here as to what the actual page numbers are for how much I read this year. And as of 2 weeks before the end of the year, I've read 38 books. My goal for the year was 30. I set it a little bit lower than I had anticipated because I switched schools last year, so I was switching to a different grade, and I wanted to make sure that my goal was still obtainable. However, the pandemic happened and I managed to read more than I had thought I would. The shortest book I read was Taken by the Barbarian Princess, and I can't help but laugh because this book was 81 pages long and it was hilarious. I know this book was trying to be, it was trying to be serious, and it was not the worst book I read this year, but it was very enjoyable. If you are looking for a very short book that will make you giggle and have a little bit of steaminess, read Taken by the Barbarian Princess. I think I got it for free on Apple Books. The longest book I read this year is The Way of Kings by Brandon Sanderson. I really enjoyed this book. I will get more into my review a little bit later. It took me a very long time to finish, and I am crediting myself with finishing it this year because I was 250 pages in a couple years ago and then never picked it back up. This year, I went back through the first 250 pages and I did manage to read it. So the longest book I read was The Way of Kings by Brandon Sanderson. The average length of book that I read this year was 449 pages. Again, with this, if anything changes before the end of the year in the next 2 weeks, I will update that right here with the new data. The most popular book that I read was The Selection with 1,583,110 people also shelving that book. The least popular book that I read was The Mistletoe Mistress, which was actually kind of cute. It's another book that I got for free on Apple Books. I get notifications every day from FreeBooksy and BookBub that send me digital links to get free books, so that's how I read that book. And it was cute. It was just a sweet little story about Regency era shenanigans and falling in love. My average rating for 2020 was a 3.8. That includes all of the really low scoring books and the books that I gave 5 stars. My scale for books is kind of like a grading scale, like the A through F grading scale. So an A book is one that's exceptional. It's one that I'll go back to. It's a 5-star book. B, it's a good book. I liked it. I enjoyed it. Maybe there were some minor character flaws or things that I didn't enjoy about the book, but overall it was something I really liked. A book that's a 3-star book is something that would, if it was a grade, get a C. It counts. It was enjoyable. It's not something I'll probably ever read again. A 2-star book is one that I would consider like a D. 2-star books are something that maybe I enjoyed it in the beginning and it had some irredeemable qualities that happen, some things that I don't like to read about or things that I think don't progress the plot or are necessary to have in the plot. Or it was something that just went off the rails as I was reading. I don't have very many 2-star reads. 2-star reads are hard for me to actually have in my reading list. The highest rated book that I read this year on GoodReads was Words of Radiance by Brandon Sanderson. It has almost 5 stars. It's rated at a 4.73 as an average. This is something I really disagree with. It was a good book. I mean, it felt like filler to me to get to the rest of the series. I don't really care for the character that was the main focus of this book. I know it was necessary for the things that had happened in this book to happen because the series needs to progress. However, I don't see how people rated it a 4 or 5-star book. It's enjoyable, don't get me wrong. But there is a lot of filler, a lot of things. I know there's supposed to be world building in fantasy, but a 1,000-page book did not need to be that long if it was not that enjoyable. I might get some hate for that. Somebody's going to come at me in the comments and say, Brandon Sanderson is God. I didn't care for that book as much as I had hoped I would after having loved Kaladin and the first book as much as I did. The first book that I left a review for this year was the ARC copy of Where Dreams Descend. I am not going to screenshot my entire review for you because that would be ridiculous. If you are interested in my review, go ahead and go to my GoodReads page. I linked it down in the description and you can read my review there. I really enjoyed this book. I thought it was exceptionally well done. It included world building, but it also felt fast-paced enough that I didn't really lose interest. I liked the characters and I can't wait to see where it goes because even though the book left off on what I would consider a cliffhanger, I don't think that it's a bad cliffhanger to have. It definitely progressed the series and I'm very excited. I want to see all of these causational relationships that are happening in the book be resolved or shared with the reader because there's a lot of unknown and I thought it was intriguing. I really liked this book. This next section is going to be a quick overview of the books that I've read this year. I'm not going to go into huge depth about them, but I will talk about each one. First, The Gilded Wolves by Roshni Chokshi. I really enjoyed this book. I gave it 4 stars. I felt at times there was a little bit of slow pace in storytelling, but I feel also looking back after having read the second book that it was necessary to develop the characters in the way that they did. Spinning Silver by Naomi Novik was not something that I enjoyed. That was a book that almost put me into a reading slump because it was so boring. And people love this book and I don't understand why. I did not like Spinning Silver at all. And I like Naomi Novik. I've read the Temeraire series. I read, what was the other one that she did? It wasn't Spinning Silver. Uprooted. I really liked Uprooted. I do not like this book. And so many people keep saying, oh, Spinning Silver was wonderful. You should read Spinning Silver. Spinning Silver this. I see it on BookTube and on Bookstagram all the time. Disagree, don't like it, was not good, did not catch my attention. I didn't care about the characters. I did not care about what was happening. No, wasn't for me. Next was Serpent and Dove. I liked this book. It was okay, but like I said in another video, I could not remember anything that happened in this book when the second one came out. While I liked it when I read it and I was intrigued enough to buy the second book, it was good at the time and just wasn't memorable. Next, I have Clockwork Prince and Clockwork Princess. I also did read the other one in that series. Again, this is another one where I don't get. I don't get why people like them. I do not understand why people like this series. So many people talk about some of these characters like they are wonderful and the love triangle in the books is just fabulous. No, it's not. It's horrible. It is a horrible love triangle. Spoilers! Tessa ends up marrying Will and then she goes back to Jem because Jem is kind of immortal like she is at the end of the book. I know Cassandra Clare has tons of other books out there. I will never read them. I do not like this series. I do not like the love triangle aspect. I do not like the whininess of the characters. I don't like that people glorify Jessamine because they think she did something wonderful. She was a horrible character. She was awful to so many people in this book. And people are like, she's a tragic character. We need to feel bad for her. No, we don't. No. Another book that I read this year was The Blade Itself. It's the first book in the First Law trilogy by Joe Abercrombie. And while I feel like the book was slow and there was a lot of world building that happened, I really enjoyed it. I do want to see what's going to happen to Logan Ninefingers in the rest of the series. I want to see how all of these worlds come together. I think that this series is one that's going to be one of my favorites as I read it because the people in the books were so real and human and they had flaws that it made them very likable. I also read Sorcery of Thorns. It was okay. I like the premise of the story more than I liked the actual story. I liked that the main character wanted to be a librarian. I liked that there were evil books or these books with personality that led to the main part of the plot happening. I liked it. It wasn't perfect. The next thing I read was To Kill a Kingdom. I actually read this to get out of a reading slump, and I really enjoyed this book. It was not at all what I expected. It's not something I would suggest to everybody. It got me out of a reading slump, so I have a lot of appreciation for this book. I don't think it was the best book I read this year. As I said, I read the Selection series. I really enjoyed this series. This was another thing that I read to get out of a reading slump before I got Zeke, my dog, and right after the pandemic really hit and I was no longer teaching in my classroom, there were days where I was just like napping all day because there was nothing to do and nowhere to go. So reading the selection really helped me power through those really tough days at the beginning of the pandemic, and the love triangle wasn't terribly bad. It didn't make me cringe as much as the love triangle in The Infernal Devices made me cringe. So it was cute. It was a cute little story. There was some character development. You can tell that as the story grew and as the plot unfolded, you can tell there was development in the writing style, so I really enjoyed that series. I talked about Where Dreams Descend already. The next book I read was Ignite Me. It's part of the Shatter Me series, and I could not tell you what it was about. I know some of the things that happened in one of the books in that series, but was it Ignite Me? I have no idea. So, I'd say because I liked it in the time, 3 stars, but because I can't remember it, that's as high as it's going to go. I'd say the same thing for the next book. It's called Pierced. I don't know what that book was about. I know it was steamy. I have no idea what happened. None whatsoever. I know I read it. It's on my list. Don't know what happened. Could not tell you a single thing about it. Could not even tell you what the characters' names are. But at the time, I really enjoyed it, so another 3 stars. We already talked about Mistletoe Mistress and The Way of Kings, so I'm going to move on to Tower of Dawn. I struggled to get into Tower of Dawn so much this year because I knew it was from, it's Chaos. You have to say his name like Chaos, so it's Kale. However, I don't like that, so I call him Cole. It's told from Cole's perspective. I think this was one of the better books in the series. It did not focus primarily on steamy situations and whiny women. I think there was actually character development and growth in this one, and we got to see more diverse characters. So it is honestly one of my favorite books from the Throne of Glass series. I really enjoyed it. Next on my list is Kingdom of Ash. It was fine. My issue with this book is that the whole series built up to this one thing happening, and then it didn't happen the way I was led to believe it would happen. And so that was really frustrating as a reader, not because I wanted it to be my way, but because why did other things in the series happen if it wasn't going to work out the way that I was led to believe that it would work out? It was fine. It brought closure to the series. It was fine. I also read Neil deGrasse Tyson's Astrophysics for People in a Hurry. If you are interested in this book, I strongly suggest the audiobook because it is narrated by Neil and you can hear the emphasis he's putting on certain words that you wouldn't necessarily get in the text. I rated it 5 stars. I know it's a non-fiction book. However, I feel like the material was presented in a way that's really personable and really relatable to everyone on any level. So that's why this book got 5 stars. It is something I will go back and reread over and over again, and I do think the next time I reread it, I will have the hardcover so that I can highlight certain parts and put some sticky notes in and really annotate the text because it was really well done. I read A Curse So Dark and Lonely this year, and I have no desire to see what else happens in that series. People say there's lots of disability rep in this book. There's one character, representative of diverse people. There needs to be more than 2 characters of a diverse background. I liked this book when I read it. It was enjoyable when I read it. I did not read the hard copy. I had a Audible credit that I used to listen to this book, and I think that's the only way I would have made it through. If you are looking for a fairy tale retelling of Beauty and the Beast and you want one that includes a beast instead of the Sarah J. Maas retelling, go for it. See how you like it. I'm not going to dissuade you from reading it, even if it's not something that I enjoy. It just wasn't for me. The next book that I read was Storm and Fury by Jennifer Armentrout. I should have known that she is not for me when I read this book, because I also tried to pick up another book of hers, which is also not for me. It was okay. This book was okay. I don't care what happens to the characters. I have no desire to read the rest of the series. I'm not going to power through a series where I'm not enjoying it just to get to the good parts. And this one just didn't do it for me. The next book I read was Go See the Principal by Gary Brooks. He is a principal in Kentucky who wrote a book about being an educator. And this was thoroughly enjoyable because he is a very humorous character himself. And I listened to the audiobook so you could hear his voice and his intonation as he was telling these stories. And it was something that myself as an educator could relate to. I also read The Beautiful by Renee Adia this year, and I have seen some controversial reviews on this book, people saying that it wasn't good, that it didn't do all the things for them that they wanted it to. I really enjoyed this book. I thought it was very atmospheric. I felt like I was in New Orleans in the 1800s. I could smell the acrid city smell as I was reading. I could taste the beignets that they were talking about. I found this writing to be beautifully done, and I am very excited to read the next book called The Damned. I just don't have it yet. So if you are a little bit put off by other reviews you've seen for The Beautiful, but you're intrigued by that sort of vampire aspect, definitely read it. I think worst thing you can do is say it's not for me, and you didn't lose anything. I also read Crescent City, House of Earth and Blood by Sarah J. Maas. I've seen lots of people say this is a 5-star book. It's the best book they've ever read. I found it very formulaic, like other Sarah J. Maas books. If I was to look at other Sarah J. Maas books and say, what is the formula? It's girl, problem, man solves the problem, they fall in love. That's what happened. Girl, problem, man, problem solved, and they fall in love. So it wasn't anything new. It wasn't unexpected. It didn't make me feel like I couldn't put it down. There were days where I didn't look at that book at all because I just wasn't interested. There were characters that I liked that didn't get enough attention, and we focused primarily on one character who was lackluster. It's so hard to describe this book without giving away the plot, because there are little nuanced things that happen throughout the book that make it difficult to share about the main character Bryce without giving away certain things that happen. I really did like the ending of this book. I thought the ending was really well done. However, if the ending was not the redeeming quality for this book, I would not read the rest of the series. I do think I will at least pick up the next book in the series whenever it comes out, because I'm interested to see who or what character it follows. However, I do not think this is going to be my highly rated series, best series of the year, best writing at all. The next book I read was called NSFW, and I don't remember a thing about this book. I think it takes place at work because the W in NSFW means work. So I think it takes place at an office, but nope, couldn't tell you a thing about it. I read Words of Radiance this year also. As I said earlier, it was fine. It was a lot of filler. I understand that there needs to be world building, but world building and filler are not the same thing. And I feel like a lot of this book was back and forth with two specific characters just adding filler. And one of those characters I really liked in the first book, and it started to be this is going to happen in chapter A, then chapter B, then chapter C, and then it starts all over again. And that was frustrating as a reader. I am hoping that the next book, and according to my friend who has already read it, that the next book is really enjoyable because of who it focuses on. I also did not like Words of Radiance because I do not care for Shallan as a character. I did not care for her in the first book. I still do not care for her. I thought I would. I thought I would like her and she would grow on me. She didn't. She's still the same character she was in the first book, and I just have to recognize there are other characters in the story that I really like. The one redeeming thing about, no, not the one redeeming thing. One of the most redeeming things about this book is the character Lopin. Lopin will forever be one of my favorite characters, and I very much enjoy his progression throughout the story. I cannot wait to see what happens in the next book because of how it ended. So, 4 stars, and we just forget about the parts that I didn't like. The next book I read was Silvered Serpents by Roshni Chokshi. This is one of the books that I was very much looking forward to this year and had been on my TBR or TB purchased list for a very long time. I pre-ordered this book and I am so glad that I did. I know that there are people who think that this book was filler and that it wasn't super enjoyable. I've seen some mixed reviews on it on BookTube and on Bookstagram. However, it honestly is one of my favorite reads this year. The story takes place in Russia, and all of our characters from the first book are brought to Russia to continue a heist. It's almost, you continue a heist, for lack of a better term. This book was very visceral, at least for me. There was a part where the characters were talking about sugar cookies, and I ended up making sugar cookies that same day because I couldn't get them out of my mind. It was beautifully done. I very much enjoy Roshni Chakshi's writing, and I cannot wait to see where this story goes in the next book. The next thing I read this year was The Stars We Steal, and this plus the book, one of the books I'm currently reading, are tied for the worst books I've read this year. I wrote a whole review on why I cannot stand the story The Stars We Steal. And this is no shade, no hate on Alexa Dawn. I just cannot stand this story. It was sold to me as The Bachelor in Space, which, yeah, here for it. I watch The Bachelor. I like trash TV, and space, love it. That's not what I read. This book was a bunch of whiny teenagers, whiny entitled teenagers on a ship dating each other. There were parts of this story that did not make sense at all. The main character is supposed to be Scandinavian in heritage. However, she's speaking German because it's easier. What? I do not understand what is going on in this book, or where some of the parts of this book came in. It did not make sense to me at all. And then the main character's big solution to how she's going to feel better each night on these dates is to drink. So we have an entitled rich girl character who solves her problems by drinking a whole bunch every night. So far, worst book of the year. Then I read They Wish They Were Us. This book was super enjoyable. I partially wonder if I enjoyed this book so much because I read it after The Stars We Steal. It's a prep school, there's a murder, lots of creepy things happen, not creepy, lots of intriguing and mysterious things happen, and it kept me interested the whole way through. Super enjoyed it, I'd say 4 stars. I read The Year of the Witching and Mexican Gothic, Blood and Honey, Mythos, The King of Elfame, Enchante, and Well Met. I talked about all of these in a wrap-up, but I'll go through these really quick. Year of the Witching, 3 stars. It was good. Puritanical times with witches and some magic. Liked it. Ending let me down. Mexican Gothic, by far one of my favorite books of the year. Second to Silvered Serpents by Roshni Chakshi. I really enjoyed this book. If you like Gothic novels, go for it because it follows that Gothic novel format. And it really was enjoyable. It was one that I will definitely go back and reread, even though I know how it ends. It is dark and creepy and really fits the vibe of I need something dark and creepy that doesn't make me hate myself after I read it. Blood and Honey was fine. Out of the 2 books in this series, this was the one that I disliked the most. It seemed, again, repetitive, like the same thing over and over again. Mythos by Stephen Fry, 5 stars. I loved it. He did a really excellent job of portraying his passion of sharing Greek myths with the world and using his trademark humor to expand on these stories, and it was really well done. I did listen to the audiobook for this because it was narrated by Stephen Fry. Strongly suggest it. It was a fantastic read. How the King of Elfame Learned to Hate Stories was enjoyable. I read the Folk of Air trilogy last year. Yes, last year, because that's when I got the 3rd book. I read the Folk of Air trilogy last year and really enjoyed it. And I found that How the King of Elfame Learned to Hate Stories was a good wrap-up or a good little additional novella for the series because you get a glimpse into who Cardan is and why he is the way he is. To me, it does not give him any excuse for being manipulative and caustic. However, you do get some insight into why he makes the choices he does. And I thought it was really enjoyable. Super quick read, like 175 pages, and made me feel a little bit more sympathetic to him without being redeeming to the problems or trauma that he caused Jude or Jude caused him. Enchante was on track to be one of my favorite books this year. I found the ending to be a little bit disappointing. However, it was good. It was a good read. It was a solid 4-star book, and I will read the next book in the series. I do just need to purchase it. And I think there's a 3rd one. I'm not sure. Might be a duology, but I am intrigued by this world. It is set in pre-revolutionary Paris, and our main character can do magic. She uses this magic skill to go to Versailles and try her hand at gambling. All in all, I thought this was a really well-done story and a different take on historical fiction in the YA genre. And second to last book on my list is Well Met by Jen DeLuca. Overall, 4 stars. I enjoyed this book. It was cute. It was simple. I've already purchased the 2nd book, and I think it's just a good feel-good series. The only thing I would change is I would have read it at the end of summer right before school starts because that's when it takes place. I really enjoyed Well Met. I'm very excited to read the next one. I think Jen DeLuca did a great job with her characterizations and building a little bit of a slow burn without it being in your face. The last book I have on my list so far is In a Holidays by Christina Lauren. This was a sweet little story about a time loop. It did not end the way I expected it to end, and it was set up to be more of a love triangle than it ended up being. Not a bad thing. I'm actually very happy that it didn't bounce back and forth between the two male love interests, because that would have irritated me. So I found that to be a surprising perk to this story, that they didn't bounce between the two love interests. I think the character handled some problems very well. I think the characterization of the people in the book stayed consistent throughout the loops, the different repetitions of this time loop, and I really liked how it ended. It was just a good, feel-good Christmas story, and originally I was hesitant to pick it up because this is gonna sound silly, I did not like the title at all, but I'm really glad that I read it. That is all I have for my reading year of 2020. Again, any updates will pop up down here at the bottom when January 1st rolls around. I hope you all have a great day, and I will see you in my next video. Bye!